This thing is packing some range. You know what time it is that OnlyLens review featuring the Sony 20-70 f4. So the first thing that we're gonna cover about this lens is just gonna be the boring stuff that you can literally look up just to get it out of the way. First things first, the price on this lens comes in at $1,098 USD. Not a bad price point for what focal range you get, since you're getting a 20-70, which is a really nice focal range because you cover quite a bit despite having an f4 aperture. You get a nice build of a lens where you have a little bit of custom buttons, you have the autofocus to manual focus, and you also get a aperture ring where you can do the one where it clicks, or if you want to do it a lot smoother and everything like that, you can as well, just to make sure that you're not having, you know, all the awkwardness of it if you want to do a smoother aperture. But for me, I like to leave the click on of it because it's a lot easier to make sure that I'm not just moving it by accident. This lens, surprisingly, is a very good weight, coming in at 488 grams, so it's not that heavy, despite of it extending outwards whenever you do the zooming in, which you kind of need it to if you're getting this type of focal range, since you got a wide range at 20 millimeters all the way to that telephoto range at 70 millimeters, which, to be honest, is a lot to cover with one lens if you wanted to do that kind of setup. And of course, you have a thread size of 72 millimeters, so if you're like me and do a lot of step-up rings, just buy a step-up ring from 72 to 82 millimeters, and now all your nice filters will fit perfectly with this lens. But that's the boring part of it. Now we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about this lens, the build of it, and everything that I think is really important because of what I've been using it for, and hopefully it'll help you out. See, this lens is an f4, which I know a lot of you will probably be turned off because you want to have that creamy bokeh at f2.8, or maybe a prime lens like a 1.8, 1.4. But despite of that, you have a nice focal range to compensate for that. So you can have a one-stop shop wonder with this lens, with the wideness to the telephoto side of it, if you're wanting to do a lot of content creation on the go. For me personally, I love the 20 millimeter range when it comes down to a wide lens, because I have my Tamron 20-40, which currently I'm filming on. It's a great lens to have for the wideness, but now the thing that I thought was missing is a little bit more of that focal range, because that, you know, the 20-40 range is not horrible and I love it still, but having that extra punch, despite of it being an f4, it really just has a lot to cover, which makes it so nice to have a one-stop shop with this type of lens to be able to create every content that I want to, whether it's photo or video. Because despite of the price point of this compared to a Tamron 20-40, having it at a $699, the Tamron to $1,098, there's a big of a price change of things, but you do get that more focal range. So if you're wanting to save some money in that aspect, to not have to have a 20-40 and then maybe get a 35-150 or something like a 70-180, you can kind of conserve it to just use one lens to basically do all your needs that you want to with the 70 range, because that's the reason why a lot of people like that 24-70 with like the G Master lenses, or also with like Sigma and things of that sort. Because despite of it being an f4 and not getting like those other lenses, because of the price point, you get that focal range. And to be honest, if you have a great low light capabilities cameras like most Sony cameras are, you'll be perfectly fine, because I have my Sony a7S III and ZV-E1 that has perfect low light capabilities, because it has a dual native ISO where you can shoot at 640 or the 12,800 ISO in S-Log3, which allows me to let a lot more light in. So the f4 is not a turnoff for me. And even with my a7 IV, I still can do quite a bit with it. And to be honest, I think you're being more than perfectly fine with an f4 lens. Because in reality, with how much technology is improving, like in Lightroom, you have that lens blur, you'll still get that nice bokeh with an f4. So you shouldn't be too afraid of cranking up your ISO a little bit, because you can clean up the images, if anything, as well for photography or videography, depending what software you use. And in all honesty, an f4 for video is actually quite nice, because you're not having to worry too much of that shallow depth of field, because most of the shots that you might need when it comes down to using this lens, you'll be perfectly fine. And if you want to add more of that separation or bokeh, zoom in. So we're going to be going ahead and doing a little bit of some example photos and videos for you guys to see how this lens works, just to give you some examples of photos and videos, so that way it can ease your mind if the f4 is sufficient for your needs with this focal range of 20-70. So one thing about this lens that despite of it being an f4, it's actually still really good for just getting some good landscapes kind of shots, where you can get a little bit of everything when it comes down to having some nice landscape or getting up closer with it because of the 70 range as well. So for me right here, if I wanted to take some photos of just the kind of landscape action at 20 millimeters is actually not too bad, just because we want to have a little bit of everything. Now, if I wanted to zoom into the section right there to get a little bit more detailed shot of the building, I could, or of the people walking, just so you see a little bit of it. It's not really going to be anything of a crazy location here, sadly, but you can get a little bit of a perspective into it just to see how it looks and can perform with it for a lens like that. For me, when I look for a lens, I just want to have something versatile that I can use with. Despite of it being an f4, it still works out pretty great. For the video, I wanted to do simply just kind of still shot style, where I can do from the 20 millimeter range all the way to the 70 to show you how it looks, going by each kind of focal range so that you see a little bit of the wideness, the compression of each section. That's mainly the main reason of just trying to show you how it'll look from the same location, because I didn't want to move anywhere, so you can see how much it zooms in just from the same distance, so you can get an idea of how good this lens can be. So now that you've seen some example photos and videos, I want to dive into of who would this lens be for, to see if it's the right fit for you. This lens is perfect for the person that wants to have a one-stop shop lens like a 20-40 or the 17-50 by Tamron, because the 17-50 by Tamron is an f4, so comparing it with this one and the price point, it's actually a really good price point, but you don't get that extra reach of the telephoto range like how you do with this one. I'm perfectly fine with giving up that 17 millimeter range to get that 20 millimeter range and above, because the wideness I can still do perfectly fine with that wide of 20 millimeter. But if zooming in all the way to the 70 adds a nice compression, I think I'll take that over the 50 millimeter range maximum that the other lens has. So this is a perfect lens for the person that wants to have something that can literally do it all in one stop with just one camera. If you want to be on the run and gun and go, basically take photos and videos with one lens setup and one camera. Because despite being able to get a 24-70 by either Sony or Sigma or anything like that, you still don't have enough wideness whenever it comes down to a vlogging kind of content creator type of person. So if you're wanting to have that kind of motion where you can just have a lot of good, wideness whenever you're on the go shooting, but also be able to get some nice B-roll with the rest of the focal range, despite of it being an f4, this lens would be perfect for you. This is one of the reasons why I actually picked up this lens, because whenever I travel, I don't want to have to condense so much in the sense of needing to only bring two lenses and not have enough focal range. But the main thing was to be able to have a condensed lens where I can cover all focal ranges with one lens and not have to be switching back and forth. So I can leave one lens on this camera, for example, and then my 35-150 to do more photo and maybe some video kind of type of work. And that way I'm always covered. This lens is also perfect if you're not worried about that low light situation like myself. I'm not worried about it because my Sony a7S III or my ZV-E1 can handle low light so much perfectly than my a7 IV, but the a7 IV can still do it. So I'm perfectly fine with having either set up that way, and I'm not scared of that f4 because I'll still get good compression going into the other way and enough bokeh that I would need to, and I can also clean it up in post if I need to desperately. With this lens, you'll be able to document perfectly all your photo and video needs, to have one lens kind of to do it all. So if you're wanting something like that, where you want to have a budget friendly for under, $1,500, because most of the time that's sadly now budget friendly nowadays, this will be perfect that you can create so much content with. And it's also a very good native Sony lens to be able to use a little bit better for, you know, just communicating with the camera for faster, you know, autofocus, maybe a little bit of the stabilization and everything like that. So not a bad choice to go with this if that's what you're looking for. Now, who is this lens not for? Well, let's state the obvious of who this lens would not be for. If you don't have a camera that's good in low light, I would not recommend getting an f4 lens, but maybe sacrificing a little bit of that focal range to get an f2.8, whether you get a 28-75 by Tamron, a 24-70 by Sony or Sigma, or the 20-40 by Tamron, just to be able to have that wideness if you really want to get that, since you're wanting to have something with better low light capabilities because it has a faster aperture. This lens is not for you also if you're trying to do more portrait style of photos or videos because you want to have a better shallow depth of field with the bokeh and creaminess of that. Probably not the most ideal because you might have to do a lot more post-editing work that you might not want to do. You might be better off forking over a little bit more cash to get a type of 35-150 because of the aperture of an f2 to 2.8, or maybe getting a 20-40, like I said, an f2.8, or a 24-70 that's a more all-around lens for portraits or everything in between. So that way you have a bit better, you know, shallow depth of field so that it looks better for your portraits instead of an f4. But overall, I think this lens is quite great despite of the f4. There's a reason why I picked it up recently for myself, because it's gonna apply a lot of things that I need on the field a lot easier, so I'm not having to worry about switching lenses back and forth, especially when I have to do a 3-camera setup for my business and all the things that I need to do, or if I want to condense down to have a 1-lens stop shop to get that extra focal length that I wanted that the 20-40 doesn't give me, but I don't want to bring my, you know, my 35-150 because it's a little thick boy. Well, this lens is perfect, and I really, you know, that's one of the reasons why I really got this lens. Also, I got it used, so it was a lot nicer to save some money that way for myself, which I always encourage you guys to get it used if you're able to, if you're not afraid of getting a little bit of a used lens that couldn't maybe have a couple of dings here and there, but if it doesn't have it, then look at that, it's pretty great. Because also, to be honest, the size of this lens, despite of zooming out like that, the weight of it is not bad at all. It's not as light as my 20-40, but it is very light to be able to bring around and just even have a full frame body setup instead of having it on like a ZV-E1 with a compact body. But if I want to do that, it'll still be compact and great to use. So that's one of the things that I really have been enjoying about this lens. I'm okay with sacrificing a little bit of that aperture to have a more focal range style kind of type of lens, because that f4 for me, I'm not scared of it. I'm okay with it. After testing out the 17-50 by Tamron, they kind of opened up my eyes into that f4 world where I'm okay with that, to be honest, because of what I need for video and photo work that I can make do with an f4 lens and have some sweet range of 20-70. So I want to leave a couple questions for you guys, so make sure to comment down below your answers. What do you guys think about this Sony 20-70 f4 lens? Is it something that you'd be interested in getting that can maybe cover all your bases? Since I know a lot of people tend to tell people to get the 24-105 Sony lens. It's an f4 as well that you can do a lot with for videography and everything like that. Or would you be preferring something like this? Are you scared for an f4 for bokeh, or are you willing to sacrifice that a little bit to get more focal range and have an awesome lens setup because you're good with the low light capabilities of your cameras and you're not afraid of it? Or maybe it's a pass and you would get something else differently. I would love to know what other lens you would go for then. But make sure to leave your comment down below and your thoughts. I would love to know more about it and have a nice discussion with other people and keep it nice and friendly out here. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.